episode of the Trailblazers Experience podcast, number one podcast on candid conversations and career journeys with women in business, tech, STEM, entrepreneurs, content creators, all things women. And I'm really excited to have my next guest here, Raine Peake, who describes herself as an experienced strategic leader, over 20 years experience in e-commerce, bricks and mortar. She's focusing on innovation, technological solutions, transformation strategy. She's passionate about data and science. And welcome, Raine.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here this morning.
I know. And you've also just been for a run, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. I did have to run to get my car, though. That was.
Oh, okay. A new car or a car that's being repaired? Oh, okay. Well, fair enough. Fair enough.
We're in the Christmas season of very lovely dinners.
That's nice. That's nice. Oh, brilliant. It's really lovely to have you on. I think I've been chasing to have you on the podcast because I hear such great things about you, about how you work with people, the organizations you've been affiliated with, and you've been also doing lots of interim roles as well, which I feel like a few years ago, interim was a dirty word. You're doing an interim
Yeah.
role, but actually it comes with a bit of freedom in terms of when you're going into a business, you're going to deliver X and you're coming out with Y. Let's talk about the journey of how that all started and how you got into retail, digital, just so that we can understand you as a person and how that's shaped what you're doing now.
Yeah, so in the late 1800s, it feels like,
Yes.
I started out in retail as an allocator. So I didn't even know that role existed. I thought they were just buyers. I knew I wouldn't ever be a buyer because I'm not creative enough. And then there was this whole kind of other world of like, oh, this is how you get the stock to the shops. That's quite interesting. And so I worked with a brand that's no longer around called Coles Menswear. It's a bit like Reese. And I just really, really enjoyed it. I really loved that kind of element of you're selling things to people and you're using data to, forecast the sales, working out which stores you were going to send the stock to. So that was kind of my sort of initiation, I would say. I mean, it was hilarious when I look back. We used to go to the pub at lunchtime, have a pint, and then I'd be in a range review. I don't know how I functioned. You're kind of like, how on earth did I do that? And I've continued in retail ever since. So I've been at Monsoon Accessorize. That was probably my longest stint. I was there for 11 years. Really fun company, really fun brand. Was within merchandising and branch merchandising. And then I left there and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Thought, oh, I'll be a florist. That's a great idea. Realised the week's cover on flowers is like 20 minutes. So
Yes, exactly.
this is quite a stressful
You've got to really
situation.
data analysis there.
Oh no,
Yeah.
oh no. Did a few weddings. Realised that my hourly rate was. I worked it out. It was 7p because it's very labour intensive. So then went back into retail, and it was a very small, a relatively small company, and it was online, and this was in 2008, so it was relatively early. And it just was really interesting. I'm like, what are all these people doing in that other side of the office that they're kind of looking at trends and data that seems very similar to what I'm doing, but not quite the same.
Mm.
So that was kind of sort of my initial sort of foray into it. So I work for Alex and Alexa, which is an amazing children's wear brand. My children were very well dressed at that point. They were completely the right ages. I think I may have created a monster with my teenage daughter. And I then kind of really got into visual merchandising online because I knew how important it was in physical retail. And the site was designer children's wear, and we were selling Dolce and Gabbana dresses for £500, and they'd be next to a pair of Nike trainers. And I'm like, this isn't how the customer perceives it. This isn't what she wants to see. So it was kind of really taking all of those learnings from bricks and mortar and employing them in a digital scenario, and then using all the amazing digital data that you can get to sort of recreate those human experiences. And then I went to Farfetch, which, I mean, sad times at the moment with Farfetch with all of their kind of current news. But at that point, it was pre-IPO, and it's a tech company that does fashion. So it just made you look at things completely differently. They run incredible test and learn programs. They partner with Google, and it was really, really exciting to be part of something where it was the polar opposite of kind of traditional retail. So they use data incredibly, and then you were almost saying, well, actually, no, this thing isn't selling because it doesn't look very nice. And all the data scientists go, no, I don't understand that. And that put me in a really different position to other sort of digital directors because they quite often come from a marketing background. So I come from a very much a merchandising trading background with that kind of tech element. So I'm not I can't code, but I understand the fundamentals of it. I
Yeah.
understand how you can implement it into a retail situation. So that's kind of why I sort of, in a very long-winded way, got into interim because it's all about learning, and I think it's super super important to learn throughout whatever you do. So the roles that I pick, I'm very specific about the companies I work for and what I will get out of them and what they can get out of me, and what kind of different challenges that you can solve within it.
I think it's important to say what the journey has been
Mm.
for yourself and how you were a florist. Who would have known that there was a lesson there? As you are passionate about it, but not passionate enough to
Yeah,
I can
not
scale this into into something.
there was no
Um,
scaling of that.
Exactly. But to your point about tech and data and working for a business that is driven by tech first and data, we've also seen the onset of businesses having not only data scientists, but behavioral scientists as
Hmm.
well, because they can marry up that thing of customer behavior. How is the customer behaving? How are they being influenced by what's happening? But how do
Yeah,
we marry the two to make decisions is a brilliant thing to be in. And you are right. Traditionally, digital directors have been marketing, but as
yeah,
we know, it's more than just that in terms of leading a digital business as well. It feels like also your interest in interim digital roles suggests a focus on being hands-on but strategic.
yeah,
What draws you to these roles, and how do you make sure that you make a tangible impact in that relatively short term, which could be 9 months, 12 months, 18
yeah.
months in that organization?
I think it depends on what the remit for the organisation is. So, for instance, Mint Velvet, it was a very specific remit. They were re-platforming onto Shopify. So that was something that was very, it's very tangible. So it's driving that roadmap. It's using all of those skills that you learn from a tech company into a retail company to say, actually, these are the things that are super important. These are the things that we can kind of iterate on. This is how you should develop a roadmap. This is how you should take the team on that journey, and sort of empowering them to be able to do that. So that was a 6-month role that delivered within that 6-month period the replatform. So it had a really kind of deliberate outcome at the end of it. And I think as well as kind of trading the site and kind of doing all of those other things with the team. So, there's elements of outcome and there's also elements of team building. So as you said at the beginning, I'm really passionate about people. I'm really passionate about developing teams, getting the best out of everyone. And I think you can, if you go in with kind of really clear objectives in terms of what is the team structure, is it about building the team? Is it about recruitment? Is it about changing how the team thinks about things? Um, I really like, my current role at New Look. It's a very traditional retailer. Everybody's got a lot of love for New Look. It's a great brand. There's 400 stores. Probably one of the biggest retailers there still is in the UK. And I think it's a lot about actually celebrating all of those things, but also showing my team, I've got quite a big team, showing them kind of different ways of working and different ways of looking at things, and really empowering people to take risks, and also, that sort of test and learn mentality that is so prevalent in tech companies. That is obviously how they develop and how they fail fast and all of those other kind of buzzwords like buzzword bingo. But in a traditional retailer are not so common because the initial, if you have a bricks and mortar store, you can't really test whether it's going to work in that location. So, there's very, very different kind of pressures on the P&L, but that you don't have in the digital world, and it's kind of transforming those kind of thought processes around.
Yeah, and that makes such a big difference, isn't it? I mean, going into a business where you're replatforming, ooh, that's lovely because
Mm.
you can do a lot of
It's really
the
good.
change management, the
Yeah,
business transformation. You're working with all the departments. It's something new.
yeah,
So you're leaving there having taken something that maybe was broken and putting them in a position to succeed in the future. Those are the exciting projects.
yeah,
Must be
exactly.
stressful, but they're really exciting.
Yeah, they're super fun. And I think, because as I said, there's a beginning and an end. Everybody's super excited when the site launches and takes its first sale. I think, there's really different ways of replatforming as well. And that's also super interesting and different ways of doing it. So Mint Velvet was a 6-month journey that I think is, very reasonable. Um, and before that, I did 2 replatforms in a year, which was, I would say, a little intense. Um, but I transferred the Arcadia brand onto Boohoo, onto Salesforce. So, and that was over a weekend, which was
Oh, wow.
absolutely behind. It was bonkers. Um, and the difference between Arcadia, which obviously for many reasons is not around, um, and the legacy tech solutions that they had, and
There were
the
lots of bolt-ons upon bolt-ons
oh,
upon
oh
bolt-ons. Yeah.
unbelievable amounts of bolt-ons, and just very, very slow and very,
Mm.
very clunky because of all of those bolt-ons and the infrastructure. And then moving it in a weekend over to Salesforce, and loads of things didn't work, but it was like, no, no, we keep going, and it was like, wow, this is incredible. People can't check out with certain payment methods, but we're still going. Um, and it's not to say one's right or wrong. It's just very, very different ways that culturally businesses do things, and it's that's super interesting. And then the kind of the mop up of that was probably 2 months, but
Wow.
the launch was super fast. So and all of those things you kind of take into the next company and kind of look at different ways of working.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked about Farfetch, who actually he's looking. What's in the news now is that he's looking to
Yeah,
take it private,
take it private again.
which I think will be brilliant because it means tech will be at the forefront and not what the shareholders want. And then
Yeah,
we go back to being a tech company that does business, that innovates, that can
mm.
say this is a reset year. These are the things we're focusing
Yeah,
on.
totally.
Do you know?
And I
And
think he's Jose is just very, he's very tech focused, and I think it will be, yeah, it'll be really good if it goes
yeah,
private, back into private hands. It did so well in lockdown, and then I think fashion companies generally sometimes don't do very well on stock markets because the nature of the business isn't like a finance house or any of those things. They're just different, right?
no, it's not.
It's not linear, so it's not
It's
you
not
don't.
linear. It's not
Yeah,
predictive. It's not one of those
no.
where, if you leave your stock in this fashion brand for the next 10 years, it'll just compound and do this.
Yeah, it just won't. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's
It just
it's not safe. It's not a need. It's not a sector where it's things that people really
You don't
need.
need it.
No,
Obviously you do need clothes.
some clothing, but you don't
But
need much of it.
no, exactly. It's not, and I think that's also a really exciting thing about how do you inspire customers to buy things. So
Yes.
I think that's, because you obviously need a certain amount of clothes, but you don't need more and more and more. And for many reasons, sometimes that's not a great thing for the planet. But it's about how you kind of inspire customers through emotion, because it's a very emotional purchase. And I have very many conversations. I must have whittled onto you about this. But returns rates are obviously an enormous factor in online retail, especially in clothing and especially in women's clothing. Um, I'm really passionate about the fact that you can't try it on, so you don't know whether you like it. I bought 6 pairs of black leather trousers last year. They
Mm.
all fitted me, but I only liked one of them. And so it's not necessarily a fit problem, it's not necessarily an image problem, it's all of those things. It's a taste thing and an emotion.
Yeah.
So you've got to kind of think, actually, for your really valuable, not implying I'm a high value customer, but for your high value customers, they probably will return more and they probably will have an emotional connection with the brand. But it's how you um, build that relationship with her, and build that customer lifetime value. So you're looking at really, really different metrics, not just a line on a profit and loss. So kind of getting the lifetime, it's super
The
important to have lifetime
KPIs, the
value.
measures maybe need to change between
Yeah, they
your
really do.
customer lifetime value, those high, in the cohort versus
Yeah.
someone who's just coming in for that
One in,
gift,
one out is
impulse
obviously
shopping.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that that's really key. I was talking to one of the members of Bloomreach, and he was
Oh yeah,
talking about how they're investing more in conversational commerce.
I think that's really
So
important.
having that conversation, having someone look at your file or your
Mm,
profile and looking at what you've ordered and the color
yeah,
palettes, and in that ways, suggesting to you things that you might need. They might have information of what
yeah.
occasions you tend to go to, and tying that in to just improve that customer experience, but also getting you to buy the things that you will essentially keep.
I think, but this is where I think there's a real marriage between data and trend and art, because and I think you have to identify your customers into, obviously we know what they've bought, and we're both in black jumpers. This year I bought a Ferrari jumper. Quite, it's not really my, it wouldn't be my normal thing, and no one would have been able to have predicted that. But Ferrari jumpers are quite on trend. So if you denote me as a trend led customer, you would have actually shown that to me. So it's
Yes,
how you show that product catalog to different people without just backwards looking.
the
When I was
personalization, isn't it,
yeah,
element? Yeah.
when I was at Farfetch, one of the data scientists was explaining how she had been to Stanford and Silicon Valley, and I was like, oh, this is so exciting and so interesting. And she was saying she'd worked at Netflix for a while, and I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. It must have all been science. And she's like, yeah, it was totally science, but there was a whole room full of people suggesting film, because it's really difficult to get newness into any algorithm. So you
Yes.
can obviously program unison, and you can but you have to throw in serendipity, or else you're in a real echo chamber. And those are the kind of things that I think are really interesting, because then you still it's using humans in a different way.
Yeah, someone was talking about how there was a data report that I read talking about how, coming back to your point of, you need to add in serendipity, otherwise you're just
Mm.
going in silos. So
Yeah,
data can only tell you so
it
much,
can only take
you
it can
know.
help you, it can reinforce your decisions,
Yes,
because it can, but it's not going to be a silver bullet. But it
no,
can reinforce your decisions, it can show you where you can make improvements, it can do
yeah,
all of those efficiencies and all of those things, but it's not going to solve your problems for you.
no, and it won't tell you about missed
No,
opportunities. The
no.
sales you could have had, missed sales, the stock that you didn't get intake that could have helped with some sort of a consumer moment, for example.
Yeah,
Beyonce Renaissance concert, silver.
yeah.
All
Who
those
knew it's
silver
silver?
outfits. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah, I have bought silver boots that I had on
Yeah,
last night with a like kitten heel. Where is this coming from? I always wear trainers. And then I bought some silver jeans. I mean, in fairness, they are going back in the return thing, because they fit. They look a bit odd. They're
yeah,
not. They're not. When I showed my 14-year-old daughter, she was like, "Mm, not so much." I was like, "Okay, they are actually that bad. It's not."
yeah,
But so and it's all those things like Barbie. It's cultural references, and I think that's obviously where designers and buyers, that's their skill set, right? That is their, they kind of that creativity, and kind of different references in different kind of walks of life, and different areas of the world. I really love going to galleries, and I've got a particular friend that we always go to the Tate every sort of couple of months, and it's how you kind of use all of those sort of references to look at different areas. And
Yeah.
you might think, oh, actually, that's a bit of an obscure thing. Why are you looking at a mark? But
We
it's culturally in the kind of ether.
Rain, we haven't even preempted that we were going to talk about this. So I went to a David Hockney
Oh
exhibition
yeah, amazing.
at the Lighthouse with my friend Jerry, and it was so interesting to see. So how we thought it was just going to be a classic exhibition, where you're just looking at all the
Mm.
pieces of work that is done. But it was a digital presentation across the four walls, talking about
Oh
his
yeah, yeah.
thought process, how he thinks about perspective, color, how he was influenced by California, moving there, and
The
things in
swimming pools.
yeah, the countryside, etc. And then I was reading, was I reading Harper's Bazaar or Vogue? He's got a segment in there because guess what? He's done a portrait of Harry Styles.
Yeah, amazing that
Harry
portrait.
Styles says he's influenced by him as well in his dress sense. So you can see
Mm.
fashion is also taking an interest in this artist who's been around forever,
Yeah, yeah.
and all of the things tying to, you know, data probably could not have preempted that that is something that will be,
No.
maybe for spring, summer, because of his eclecticness and the color palettes, that might be something that will be coming through in that.
Yeah. And I think it's just, I really, as I said earlier, I just really like learning about things, and
Yeah.
I'm just quite interested in the world. So
You're curious,
yeah, really
very
curious. And I
curious.
think that is why I kind of enjoy working, I enjoy learning. And I think you've got to kind of think actually what's fun. You
Yeah.
know, what are your drivers, and how do you keep not keep going, but I've had a very long career and I'm still really enjoying it. And I think when I look at my colleagues who I maybe worked with in other roles, some of them have gone on to do completely different things or have stopped working. But I think the ones that are still working, it's a really key theme that we're all quite curious, and we all kind of
Yeah.
are quite passionate about what we do. And I'm really passionate about, as I said before, about, really inspiring the team. And really, I mean, it's a very female dominated industry. And I think it's really showing women, what you can achieve. It's not one or the other. It's not family or work, or, it's how you make it work for yourself, and how you can kind of, you don't have to have a linear career. You can do different things. You can do different, move from sector to sector, or I've gone from merchandising to a tech company back to retail, doing very, very different roles. And I think that's how you kind of maintain a career, and kind of relevance, really.
So also not being sector or industry agnostic, being open to
Yeah,
how can I add value with the skill sets I have,
exactly.
and being curious, being innovative, being entrepreneurial. I
Yeah,
think having those approach, because then you're open to change, you're open to doing things differently.
yeah,
Is
I think.
is there an interim role that you were like, you don't have to mention it. This is just not my path. This is not for me. And what were the deciding factors that made you said, okay, in the future, this is something I would not be looking to pursue?
Not particularly, because I am quite conscious of where I choose, but I
Yeah,
do like to do different things in different orders. So where I was at, say, Jigsaw and Mint Velvet are both, well, Mint Velvet's bigger than Jigsaw, but quite similar demographic of customer, quite similar sized teams, um, quite, Mint Velvet's founder led, Jigsaw has an owner. So and they were both on Shopify. So I thought, for my next role,
yeah.
um, I want to go to, a larger turnover, bigger teams, uh, different, and different challenges. So, the challenges are very, very different at New Look, in terms of, we've got at Jigsaw, there was one data scientist. I've got a team of five.
I know
So
you talked about
it's
this as well. Honestly, I was just like, awesome. That is like data on steroids.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so good. It's just so brilliant. You're like, oh, let's do, and it's just incredible. Within my team, we have to do digital analytics, as I just said. We also have an insights team. We work with Kantar. It's really powerful. And using that data across the business is brilliant, because we're looking at market share all the time. We're looking at all of the sort of customer demographics. We're looking at it regionally. it's really empowering.
Yeah, because there are not very many retailers that can look at, unless you're as big as New Look or the
No.
Inditex group, to look at it regionally and say, this is what we think the store in this town is doing, to get that granular and be able to influence, whether it's from a social, a media platform, from it's what you're showing the customer once they've got
Yeah,
on the website. It's awesome. And just for the audience, there's a lesson to be learned here, because you've gone to a bigger organization. You are not also wedded to titles as
no,
well. And I think that's also a big thing, where people are so wedded to a title, but you may have the director title, but not have the teams or the remit, or be able to influence, or be able to
yeah,
make tangible change and just jog that brain of yours a bit. Whereas now you're in a head of role, but you've got teams and it's a
yeah,
bigger organization, and the impact and value add is much bigger.
yeah. It is. I've got a far bigger team than I had when I was a director, probably triple the size. Um, yeah, and it's just a very, very different way of looking at it. I think you can, obviously you want to progress in your career, and obviously that there's sort of, I was very passionate that I wanted to be a director. But I think then when I kind of looked around and was like, oh, actually, what am I getting out of this? What are the kind of key things that I'm doing? It's like, oh, this other opportunity is actually great
Yeah,
because of the scale of the company and the size of the company.
yeah.
So I think, yeah, I think just kind of looking and thinking, what is it for me?
What are some of the challenges do you think you've faced? Obviously, we've talked about fashion. Obviously, is has a lot of women in the
Hmm.
industry. But what some of the challenges as a woman in leadership, as a woman coming up in the business, that you think there's knowledge you can impart
Yeah,
that might be impacting others right now?
I think in my first role when I was an allocator, a man came in and he earned £1,000 more than me. And this was obviously over 20 years ago, but it still wrangles. I'm like, oh my God, that's the most frustrating thing ever. So I've been really conscious to be very fair and be very supportive. I think the main thing, and I do think it's changed. I don't think you kind of have to demonstrate those very male, very aggressive. That was probably quite sexist saying it was male, but very aggressive sort of management and managing by fear. That
Yeah,
was quite prevalent when I first started out, and that's because it was learnt behaviour from other people, right? It wasn't that those people were naturally, terrifying. But I think there's just very, very different ways of working, and I think you can. And what I would always counter is you don't have to do those things to succeed. You can
yeah,
kind of come at it in a very, very different way. You can look at things in different areas. I'm quite passionate about at the moment is the difference between managing people and being a principal.
mhm,
So especially in tech companies, there are a lot of people who are principals, obviously, who are incredibly skilled at their roles, and they have that different path where they don't manage people. And I think in traditional retailers, to be promoted, you generally have to manage, and I think that's a really different dynamic when you're kind of thinking about team planning and all of those things. Actually, these people who are brilliant at what they do, they might not want to manage people. How can we encourage them to progress or to learn or to do different things? So I think it's sort of the changing nature of roles and the changing nature of workforces and the automation of things. It enables people to do things that you need a human to do. So it's being able to do things at scale that we haven't been able to do before. I think you should always embrace that and not be worried about it. So it's not necessarily about getting rid of people. It's about enabling change and enabling scale so that you can kind of do different things. So I think you've got to kind of flip it on its head and kind of think, actually, what are these things doing that will enable me to do things that are more fun?
And you talked about the managing by fear. Over the
Oh,
years, there was a McKinsey
horrendous.
report that I read talking about how leadership styles have evolved. What are businesses looking for? So
Mm,
you either had a leader who led by consensus, so democratic,
mhm.
and then you had someone who was authoritative, and that was it,
Yeah, there's
decision
nothing in
made.
between.
Yeah. And now you've got different styles. There's transformational leadership, collaborative leadership, there's coaching style, strategic. And to your point of not everyone in your team or your department will want to be a manager. If they're
No,
a specialist, if you've got specialists in an area, that's brilliant too.
totally brilliant.
Do you know? And AI is such a big thing. I keep on saying, what's definitely promised is, death taxes and AI. That's happening for sure. And it's how do you use AI to take away those admin heavy tests?
Yeah, it's just it's a tool, right? It's not
It's a tool.
it doesn't really have its own innate intelligence. I mean, I do know generative AI is a bit more fancy than that, but it is a tool. It's not this kind of beast that kind of does its own thing. It's a friend of mine was showing me her. She showed me this picture, and I'm like, what is your son doing? And he's training to be a dentist. It just looked like he was kind of chipping away at something in midair. But it's because he'd got a virtual reality headset on and they were using it for things like that. I think there's a lot of fear around it, but I think the amount of good it can do is incredible. And I always am very positive, and I always think about the positive things in anything. Um, if you feel threatened by it, you will be threatened by it, and you won't be able to harness it to the best of its abilities, I would say.
I think there's so many use cases of how generative AI is just going to revolutionize search,
Yeah,
shopping,
yeah,
delivering exceptional customer experience, which is what we want,
totally.
which hopefully
Yeah,
reduces
exactly.
returns, all these things that will make that online shopping experience.
It totally will. It will take away the heavy lifting, and it
Yeah,
will it will enable you to hone in quicker to the thing that you like.
that you're trying to get
Yeah,
to.
that you're trying to get to. And I
Yeah,
think, when anybody, one of my favorite descriptions is, um when you're talking about product recommendations, I said, well, if you go into a store, if I walk into a store, the sales associate knows what size I am, what height I am, basically what things I like. Um, she can kind of come out and show me all these things. What you're doing with a recommendation engine is you're trying to get those signals for all of those things. So it's supercharging those signals that a human makes a decision in like 100th of a second. So it's
yeah.
giving all of those extra touch points and extra data and enrichment and all of those things to be able to you know it's enabling it to think super fast.
It's also interesting because when you walk into a shop, you might not be dressed. If I think of my shopping
Hmm.
experience, when I walk in, I'm usually in my gym kit. So she
Yeah,
walking in, and all these suits, outfits, she has to then deduce saying, right, okay, is she in the right store? Or B, is she then in
hmm,
her casual athleisure?
yeah,
How
yeah,
do I find out what she's looking for? Is it an event, an occasion? What does she do for work? And
yeah,
those
exactly.
conversations, I still feel we cannot substitute
You cannot substitute
the
humans, and that
retail experience in store.
absolutely not. And that, I think, is why, because to go back to our earlier conversation, because it's emotional.
Yeah,
You are emotionally engaging with that item of clothing or that amazing, I don't know, sofa or something, because you don't necessarily need it. So it's an emotional purchase. It's about the texture. It's about, does it how it makes you feel, all of those things. And I think that's why the last few places I've worked are omnichannel, and it's because I shop all my favorite shops. I shop online and I shop in store. But if I'm, in a blinding hurry, I'll order it for next day delivery.
yeah.
Because you don't, there isn't a one size fits all. I really love live shopping. I think it's a really brilliant way, because I've said this before to numerous people. People buy from people. They don't buy from just an innate website. They are buying from the brand they love, or they're
Well, this is
falling.
why live streaming
Yeah,
and
live
Get
streaming,
Ready
live
with
shopping,
Me,
social.
Shop with Me
Yeah,
is so successful, especially in countries that have established it. Everyone buys everything by seeing it first on.
yeah,
So it's tying, those omni-channel experience, thinking like how the
absolutely.
customer is thinking as well.
I think that's definitely the way forward. I don't think you'll pick the channel consistently, but you'll pick the channel that is suitable for you at that point in time. And I think live streams and I really like um like Marks and Spencer's TikTok, where all of their branches have got TikToks, and you've got, can't remember the name of the lady, in Romford, who's, showing you my Percy Pig. It's just, and it's fun, right? It's
Yeah.
funny, and it's,
And it's genuine. It's
it's
organic as well.
genuine, and
Mm.
it's also for those store colleagues, it's making their life more fun as well.
Oh
So
yeah.
they're kind of having fun. They're doing all of those things. It will, I'm sure, help with employee retention and all of that. And it's just, people talk incessantly about the death of the high street. It'll just change.
Yeah,
It'll just
definitely.
it'll just be a different version of the high street, and that's, whether you think that's a good or a bad thing is almost not irrelevant, but it will change. So it's kind of, how do you embrace that change, and how do you, you know, work with your store colleagues, or how do you, you know, slightly pivot your business into that.
Well, pivoting on, balancing leadership roles and interims can be demanding. How do you prioritize self-care, amongst all these commitments and just maintaining what a healthy work balance looks to you? Because there is no one size fits all
No,
as well.
I'm I'm quite as we said earlier, I really like running. I'm a bit Forrest Gump with it. So and I always, well, every weekday morning we'll do some form of exercise, and I know that works for me because I'm a very early riser. So and I'm also quite like routine. So then I kind of do all of those things in the morning. Then I feel really much more energized. All those endorphins are going, and then I feel like sitting down and kind of, especially when you're working from home, you can do like 200 steps, and you think, oh my goodness me, all I've done is like 200 steps and had 3 biscuits and 20 cups of coffee. So it's kind of how you, so that's how I prioritize it. I prioritize, exercising in the morning, um, and that I find personally really helps kind of in my mental health, because then I don't tend to listen to music. So then if I'm running on my own, I'm just kind of thinking about whatever, trying not to trip up if it's dark. I quite often run with friends, so that's really good fun, and we put the world to rights. So if we're being especially vociferous about something, that hill doesn't seem so much of a hill when you're kind of banging on about something. So that's kind of what I do from that point of view now. And as I said earlier, I like learning about things. I read quite a lot, and just being nosy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that I like. I like gathering facts about things. Not that necessarily I can remember that fact, but I like learning about it, and I like finding out about it, and all of those things. I just find it really, really interesting. And then I think if you're curious, then that kind of helps in lots of other areas of your life. I'm very curious about tech, and how it works, how it's going to enable me, how it's going to help me to do something. And then you can kind of employ that in other areas.
There's something to be said about it. From everything that you've said, you've got both of your brains working. So you've got the inspiration of data and science, but
Mm.
you're also on the art and the creative side. I think that helps you with whatever role you're in.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a geography degree, which is so random because it's nothing related to anything I've done. Maybe with allocation, I kind of knew where the stores were roughly,
Hmm.
but it's, and it
Geo-planning, geo-mapping.
geomapping maybe. I mean, it was human geography, and it was a
Yeah.
long time ago, but I think it's, it's don't be restricted by what you think. I've always been, so geography is in the humanities, so that's kind of, I think, why I like lots of different things. It's not a particular. I never thought I want to be an accountant. I'm just going to learn accountancy, and I probably could have been an accountant because my roles are very numeric. They're quite similar. But I think it's that kind of, don't be restricted by what you study, what you're learning. Or, you kind of need to go with your passion, and whether
Yeah.
that passion is, I've always been really interested in fashion, and that's kind of been an underlying thing. And I've always been really interested in that relationship of kind of the sort of creativity and how you kind of sell that to people. Um, I'm quite competitive. So we were before we were talking, it's reforecasting and budgeting and beating those budgets, and kind of, what can you do with all of those things, and can you make that store in wherever sell more, or by doing that visual merchandising, is the conversion going to increase? So it's those kind of competitive things with yourself. And yeah.
It's about finding is it your ikigai, isn't it? What you love, what you're good at,
Yeah.
what you can be paid for, and
Yeah,
what the
exactly.
world needs. All of that passion,
Yeah, it totally. And
passion. Yeah,
I had a really brilliant coach for a while, Gary Krotas. He's amazing, absolutely amazing. And he works through Gallup strengths, and I'd never done that before. And it was really eye-opening, because you go through all of these things, and it kind of gives you 50, you have 50 different strengths, and it orders them into what you're naturally good at, what you're actually good at, and then what you're a bit rubbish at. And the point is that you then should think about work to lean into the things that you're good at, not to try and correct the things that you're not good at.
that's
And
very
I
good
and
advice.
I
Yeah.
found that really, really eye-opening, because I was like, yeah, that thing, I'm never really very good at that. But why am I focusing on roles that include that? Because that's not necessarily my core skill set. My core
Mhm.
skill set is, I like learning about things, I'm strategic, I like innovation. So those are the kind of things that I should go after. And I think it was really like a kind of thing of thinking, oh yeah, that really makes sense. And that's why I really enjoyed these roles. It's not so much those roles.
Yeah, it's like a self-analysis, isn't it, of
Yeah.
yourself? Because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for failure,
Hmm.
going for the things that you think you need to be doing, but you're not excelling
Exactly.
at, for
Exactly. I
sure.
mean, yeah, I mean, it's like that taxing. You've got to do it, but it's quite painful. So,
Yeah.
but you can employ an accountant if you want to. There's kind of different ways of doing things.
Mhm. So, as a leader still working at the intersection of innovation and tech, what advice would you give to professionals aspiring to make an impact in the digital and e-commerce space?
I think you've got to really think about what is the thing that you can bring to it that you're trying to change. So, what is your kind of specific skill set, and how are you going to employ that? So, I'm, very much about customers, about different ways of talking to customers, and how you kind of marry sort of traditional retail and for want of a better word, more modern retail, and team. So you've got to kind of think, what are the areas that are going to make you different from other people, and have really specific results in mind when you do things. So I'm a really passionate advocate of OKRs, which are objectives and key results, and they're very different from sort of objectives that you'd set 20 years ago, because of the results element. And it's being really focused in on what are the things you're trying to change, and what are those elements that you're trying to shift the needle on. I've always worked in commercial roles, so obviously I'm always tasked with commercial metrics, but there's a lot of different ways to get to those commercial metrics. Effectively, I'm employed to sell more things, right?
Yeah.
But that's, the nub of it is that. But you can kind of go about that in loads of different ways, and I find that with OKRs, that it's really great for bringing a team on the journey with you, but also the R's. The ultimate R is obviously revenue, but the other R's are kind of take you on that journey to get there, and it just makes it really specific, and it change within teams.
Yeah. I think just for the audience, who may not know what an OKR is, so obviously the objective is the
The
qualitative
objective is the
statement
thing,
telling us what you want to improve the thing. And
thing.
then the KR, the key results, quantitative measurable outcome. How close are we to achieving it? And the success of the objective is measured by the progress made on the key results, isn't it? Whether
Yeah.
it's revenue or transformation or change.
It has to be very
Uh,
specific. It has to
yeah,
have a yes, no answer. You can have
exactly.
you can have strategic ones, which are like, we want to be more um, we want to have a higher green agenda. That can be a strategic one because it doesn't really have a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
But you can have a very, very specific one of the conversion rate has to increase by 1%.
Or 0.2%.
Yeah, not by no.
Realistic.
But I think no. But
Yeah.
and then you have a list of tactics to get to it, and I think the really empowering thing is that you don't have to win with them.
No.
So as long as you've employed the tactics that you have said that you're going to do to get to it,
Yeah.
you can measure the result, and then you can change tactics. So where kind of innovations are happening really quickly, or where there's kind of different tools that are using, any of those things, they should be every 3 months. And it depends on the
Review.
maturity of the business as to how far out you should go with them.
Agree. Totally. That's really important, I think.
Yeah. So a much more, a much bigger business, you can probably set 6 months annual OKRs. A much smaller startup, or where you're trying to change things quicker, or where you're trying to change behaviors and into waterfall to agile. And I think agile is one of those things that agile doesn't mean just kind of chaos. I've been in situations where agile is
You need to be agile.
you're saying agile, it's just
Yeah.
absolutely chaotic. This is
Yeah.
not
Agile
agile.
means being reactive to the consumer
And
moments, the
changing your
trends,
direction. So
changing direction and views. Yeah.
so it's like in that whole test and learn mentality of that. It's brilliant if the test is fantastically wins or fantastically loses. Anything in the middle is a bit like, oh god, this is not telling me anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that agile piece is, actually, if that test had told you Y and you thought it was going to be X, you pivot and change. It's
Not
not just
taking
like you're
too long
going
to pivot.
scattergun after everything.
Yeah, a lot of businesses are resistant to change, isn't it? We've set this goal,
Mm.
this OKR, and this is the direction we're going, but you need to be open
You
to
need
change.
to be open to change, and you need to be, who would have thought, we've had some really dreadful world events recently,
Mm.
and you cannot predict them, but we've got to kind of think about what we would do in that situation.
Mm.
It's
And how do we change direction to,
Yeah, how do we change direction? How do we mitigate for it? Or if it's, for instance, the weather is just bonkers. With women's clothing, the seasons are just very, very different. So we've spent a lot of time recently talking about um, we're just switching the seasons around, changing the way that the perception of when you traditionally would actually sell things, being more in the moment, and having more continuous lines, having more people are traveling more. So we had our search terms were up last week for swimwear because people are going on Christmas holidays, which is obviously quite obvious when you think about it. But it's just a very, very different way of
yeah,
looking at
I'm
it.
going
And
away to
always,
somewhere where it's warm, getting
yeah,
away from this. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, who wouldn't? But it's just kind of thinking, actually, we probably do need to have most things year round, with obviously
Mm.
a focus for,
And
when
that
it
might
when it
help with the whole,
it'll help with
circular
markdown.
economy
Yeah,
and how things are produced. Maybe things might not be produced in excess because you're
yeah,
thinking of a
totally.
year-round
But I
collection. So
think,
there's a lot in that.
to your point of things produced in excess, that is where data and AI can massively, massively help. Sarah from Dressy is such an advocate for this. And it's about predicting what you're going to sell in a different way so that you don't overproduce. So obviously humans do it with brilliant, amazing accuracy. But if you can you can't do size runs generally for each individual thing by each individual amount of data.
No,
You
yeah.
generally do short dresses this size run, long dresses this size run. But if you can kind of take it down into kind of layers and layers and layers, you will actually increase the efficiency of what you're
Yeah,
selling,
to
and
the
not have to,
granularity of
yeah,
what does that size curve look for that
and
particular
not have
shape.
to
Yeah.
produce as much. And I think that's where data and AI really can massively help in terms of, all of those things, because it's the amount of data it can ingest in comparison to what you can traditionally do now.
So looking to the future, I can sense you're very passionate about, AI and the trends and the advancements of in digital. where do you see yourself, in terms of shaping the industry or your career in the next few years? Have you thought about this, or you're in the now?
Um, I'm in the now at the moment because I think it's a really interesting time at the minute because I think obviously AI is such an amazing thing. I think companies are going to really massively reorganize themselves based on that. I think the amount of data it'll be your currency much more than your kind of anything else, and the amount of data that you've got associated with each of the things. I think it'll fundamentally change the way people report because you need to have far more inputs. And I think because at the moment we're at that cusp of we don't have enough inputs into the data to make the data meaningful. So there'll
Mm,
be that kind of shift into actually there's far more things that you can measure and you're tagging that because it's good in, good out kind of situation. So I think that'll be a really interesting thing. I think the advancements in that will be once that's happened, it'll be super, super fast. But then I think it'll be really interesting what happens with the human element because people buy from people, and it's also that kind of taste level and all of those things you can't really machine learn. So it's you can machine learn the efficiency. So I'm really excited and really interested to see where that goes. I think for me personally, I think it's about helping companies get their um, sort of everything aligned so that they can be able to use all of these things. I think it's about working with teams to not be scared of it.
yeah,
And I think it's about how you coach people to see it as a fantastic opportunity, and not threatening. And change is hard, and people are human, right? You've got to treat people as humans and with kindness, and take them on the journey and show them how this is going to empower their lives and make it their jobs more interesting, or kind of give them different ways to look at and kind of excite them in terms of the opportunity.
yeah. Excite and delight and
Yeah.
empower is like really important for that too. Trailblazer takeaway tips. I mean, we've circled around and talked about so many things, and you've had a really colorful career. Still a lot more to come from you, definitely. And your passion is evident in the way you talk about your sector and the things that you're
hmm
doing. But if you were to share 3 or 4 nuggets of information or tips for the audience, what would they be?
I would say always be enthusiastic because that has been my kind of underlying thing. And I think it gets you so far in life. Um, I would say don't be afraid to make mistakes and learn from them. And I think that's how you kind of can succeed. I know it's really tried. And I think owning them, I think really own what you do, really own that thing that you've done, or really, and just kind of being like, right, actually, this happened, we're doing that, we're changing, we're pivoting, we're doing something else. If and I also, I've been very fortunate to work in some great places where I've been super, super happy. But if you're not, you've got a choice, you can leave. And
Mm,
then it kind of really think about what are the things that really motivate me and then go after it. And I think don't be afraid to go after what you really want. I was speaking to someone last week and she was almost apologizing for being ambitious. And I was like, why are you apologizing for being ambitious? This is ridiculous. It is really great to be ambitious. It's really great to want to do different things and be promoted. And she's got an amazing opportunity. She's like, oh, and I said, yeah, go for it. Absolutely go for it and set yourself paths that you want to take and go for it. It's a really good thing.
yeah, you have to be living a life of setting yourself up for your own personal and
Yeah.
professional success, because we only have one go at this, isn't it?
You only have one go at it. So you
Depending on
kind
what
of
religion you believe in.
I mean,
Um,
I'm not sure I can do this twice.
yeah,
But I think you've got to you've got to choose your happiness, right?
choose your happiness. That's a very good one. Summarizes it all.
Yeah.
Rain, this has been awesome. This has been amazing. Hearing your journey and what's brought you this far. It's always interesting to speak to women who are very passionate about what they do. It feels you're passionate not just about tech, but
Yeah.
people. which is
Yeah,
what
for
life
sure.
is all about. So I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been really great fun.
Really good. So for the audience, this has been the Trailblazers Experience podcast. You know where to find us, everywhere where podcasts are streamed, audio and video, and see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.